Yo, here is Christianity's original and clear guide for marriage and divorce, King James Bible. Matthew 5:31-32. I, Jesus, say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causeth her to commit adultery, and whosoever shall marry her that is divorced, committeth adultery. Matthew 19:9. I, Jesus, say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery, and whoso marrieth her that is put away doth commit adultery. Mark 10:11-12. Jesus saith, whosoever shall put away his wife and marry another committeth adultery against her. And if a woman shall put away her husband and be married to another, she committeth adultery. Luke 16:18. Whosoever putteth away his wife and marrieth another committeth adultery, and whosoever marrieth her that is put away from her husband committeth adultery. Romans 7:2-3. The woman which hath an husband is bound by the law to her husband so long as he liveth, but if the husband be dead, she is loosed from the law of her husband. So then, if while her husband liveth she be married to another man, she shall be called an adulteress. But if her husband be dead, she is free from that law, so that she is no adulteress. Yet Christendom now has many psychotic views. First, some Catholic ideas. Though priests agree that marriages are indissoluble lifetime commitments, to sidestep this permanency, abracadabra, we have annulments. Their reasons for annulment follow with my critique. Lack of form. If baptized Catholics marry outside the Catholic Church, those marriages can sometimes be considered invalid. Dispensations from the correct form can be granted, but without it, marriages can be invalidated. But every group can consider marriages outside their organization invalid. Then what? And why grant a dispensation from the so-called correct form? Contrary intentions. The presence on the wedding day of an intention contrary to an essential marital quality. Example, one spouse does not intend to be faithful or believes in divorce. But why wouldn't you talk over these issues before the wedding? Psychological incapacity. Incapacity on the wedding day to assume marital duties. For example, one party suffers serious mental illness preventing him or her from assuming parental or spousal duties. Consent requires freedom from mental illness, including latent and undiagnosed illness. But if your sweetheart was so bad, why did you marry him or her? So-called mental illness is subjective. If someone is likable, they are okay. If they are unlikable, an insurmountable problem can be diagnosed, disposing of a handicapped person who has a greater need for a helpmeet than the average person. Psychological immaturity. Immaturity impeding either party from understanding marriage's true nature. Example, a teenage couple hardly know each other but decide to marry, hard to believe, because the girl is pregnant. They haven't thought about how they will support each other in marriage, nor know one another for well enough for a lifetime commitment. But if it was not considered a true marriage, you would need conclude that they were living in sin. However, they remain a sanctified couple if they say so. Modernists bend the situation one way or the other to suit themselves. Conditionalism, presence of a future marital condition such as one spouse demanding the other achieve a certain income level. In other words, every time a couple fights over money, there are grounds for so-called annulment, which is divorce. Pauline privilege, the only reason of the six with any validity whatsoever. When two unbaptized people marry, that marriage is non-sacramental and can be dissolved in favor of a new marriage after one party receives baptism. Yet, so-called Pauline privilege originated from Ambrosiaster around AD 370. No previous allowance was known. Afterward, most churchmen rejected it. Not until the Reformation was the church evenly divided over this. Today, most of Christendom accepts this premise, but demand for such divorces has equally multiplied. Divorced and remarried couples not having received an annulment are not permitted to receive communion unless they agree to live as brother and sister. They are still encouraged to attend Mass and raise their children in the Catholic faith. In other words, they can still cohabitate and mislead others. And certainly they are encouraged to remain Catholic, otherwise the church could not get their money. So the Catholic Church is quite heretical regarding divine holy matrimony. Now, some Orthodox leaders, along with many Protestants, have used the NIV text, which perverts fornication, specific in Matthew 19:9 and elsewhere, into a so-called marital unfaithfulness, a very general. Quoting an Orthodox priest about Christ's sole, that's one and only injunction of divorce for adultery only. I have never seen cases not involving adultery, whether cathexis in another person or thing, such as alcohol, drugs, work, etc., or putting their spouse in a secondary position as a result of infatuation, obsession, and or being controlled by power, wealth, addictions, careers, mental illness, etc. In those cases, economia, that is second and third marriages performed by economy, so-called economy, is applied in concern for people's salvation. Rather, people's salvation is code for making money, their church profiting on every subsequent marriage. Other Orthodox groups have a process called what they call ecclesiastical divorce, which is annulment. Summarily divorce for everything but perfect marriages. Another sophisticated dunghill made to hide behind and avoid the light of Christ's simple teaching. Heresy indeed! Defining marriage and annulment. Marriage is a legally recognized personal union entered into by a man and woman intent upon sharing their lives together, and which establishes rights and obligations between the spouses, their in-laws, and future children, a covenant between a man, woman, and God. Specifically, marriages are put together by God through the state and the couple's consummation. Before a legal marriage ceremony can be performed, one must obtain a marriage license from government authorities. When legally married persons seek divorce, they need a judge to nullify the marriage. Religious leaders do not issue legally binding marriage licenses and never had any legal authority to grant a divorce. Furthermore, the institution of marriage predates recorded history. Marriage in some format existed in all societies and was practiced by all cultures. Since marriage was not originated by religious tradition, religious leaders have no right to alter it whatsoever. An annulment is an official pronouncement which declares a marriage invalid. Here are examples of a legitimate annulment and why. Annulling a gay marriage, or one where a spouse discovered that they married someone of the same sex, compares to buying a car, getting its title, and receiving a boat instead. You undo the invalid transaction. Annulling a marriage to someone who lied and said they were never married before is like buying a car, getting its title, receiving the car, and finding out that it's stolen. You undo the invalid transaction. Reading Divorce in Remarriage Part 2 is necessary to complete this subject.